Queer News and Journalism is a Gay 45 original podcast published every week on Thursdays, where we come together to comment the topics in the weekly queer news published by our newsletter, The Nine. Subscribe on gay45.com to get the latest news every week. Welcome to this week's Deep Dive. We're here to unpack the most important nuggets, the key insights from the latest queer news. It's all straight from the recent issues of our newsletter, The Nine, or as we often call it, the Gay 45s. Our mission today, well, it's to explore this fascinating range of global updates on LGBTQ plus rights, community, and culture, too. We'll be covering quite a bit from political defiance in Europe, which is really something, to global survey trends and some significant cultural moments. Should be quite the conversation. Okay, let's kick things off with a headline that honestly really caught my eye from our European reporting. It's about Budapest Mayor Jerzy Karakcsny's, incredible act of defiance. He's basically announced the city's Pride Parade is going ahead on June 28th. This is despite a government ban.
He's calling it a municipal event, needing no official approval. I mean, what does that actually mean, practically speaking?
Well, it's quite bold, especially when you look at the political landscape in Hungary right now. You've got Prime Minister Viktor Orban's right-wing government, which has been systematically restricting LGBTQ plus rights. They often use these child protection laws as a cover. Remember that 2021 law, banning depicting homosexuality to minors. And recent constitutional changes have only made things tougher. So for the mayor to just say municipal event, no approval needed, it's not just finding a loophole, it's a very direct challenge. Like Pride organizer Mate Hegedus said in our analysis, it's about the constitutional right to assemble peacefully. And it's significant that EU lawmakers are planning to join. It shows this isn't just a local fight,
Right, that solidarity is key. But from that kind of inspiring defiance, we unfortunately have to pivot. Across the border in Poland, there was a much more jarring incident, really highlights the opposition. Our reporting covered this moment where Grzegorz Braun, he's an MEP for the far-right Konfederacja Korony Polskiej, he actually destroyed a queer-themed exhibition in Warsaw. Even graffitied, "Stop the propaganda of perversions." I mean, wow, what does an act like that signal?
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. And it's definitely more than just vandalism, isn't it? It's a deliberate attack. Amnesty International called it exactly that, an attack on freedom of expression and queer visibility. It really shows this growing boldness from certain far-right groups, not just disagreeing, but actively trying to suppress and destroy. But, the flip side is the community's resilience. It's quite striking. The organizers immediately vowed to restore the works. They said, "We will not be silenced by hate." That determination is powerful.
Absolutely. And then moving over to Moldova, our newsletter reported tensions flaring there too. Simultaneous pride and pro-family marches in Chinaino on June 15th, separated only by police. Sounds incredibly volatile.
It really was a very tense situation. The Pride organizers actually accused the mayor of undermining their event. Apparently, he failed to restrict traffic even though it was approved beforehand. They called it a violation of our constitutional right to assembly. So you see this lack of institutional support, or maybe even obstruction. It's a pattern in places where rights are contested. And meanwhile, you had the pro-family rally nearby, led by the Socialist Party, chanting anti-LGBTQ plus slogans. There were even reports of scuffles. Activists pretty much saw it as political manipulation, especially with elections coming up. But despite all that, the Pride March went ahead. They were demanding legal recognition for same-sex partnerships. It really speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. So despite these flashpoints of opposition, pride parades are clearly pushing forward. Our reports also mention parades sweeping through other major European capitals. Vienna, Warsaw, Rome, Athens. Thousands marching. How did they each express their messages?
Yeah, that's the interesting part. Each city had its own flavor, its own focus, reflecting local struggles. So in Warsaw, the banner was "Love is the answer." And you had the mayor, Rafał Trzaskowski, and the equality minister, Katarzyna Kotula, leading the march. She's actually proposed a civil partnership bill, so that's a significant alignment.
Okay.
Then in Rome, the theme was outlaw. Really pointed, targeting the right-wing government. They even had rainbow and Palestinian flags, plus a satirical Viktor Orban float, connecting the dots,
Yeah.
And Athens, marking 20 years of Pride, used the slogan, "We count," emphasizing history, resistance, especially with growing far-right threats there, too. These aren't just parties. They're powerful political statements.
Definitely powerful statements. But how do these big, visible events stack up against, the day-to-day reality for LGBTQ plus people globally? Let's zoom out a bit. We looked at that Ipsos study across 26 countries in the Gay 45s. It paints a more complex picture, doesn't it?
It really does. It's a bit of a mixed bag, honestly. On the one hand, you still see broad support for basic legal protections, like 72% for LGBT individuals, 71% for trans people wanting protection from discrimination in housing, jobs, services. That's solid.
Okay, that's good.
But here's the concerning part we flagged. Since 2021, support for some LGBTQ plus issues has actually dropped. Bland sponsorship of LGBTQ plus causes, down to 41% from 49%, workplace initiatives, down to 38%, even same-sex marriage approval dipped a bit, 69% from 74%. And support for trans athletes competing according to their identity, that fell sharply, just 22%.
Only 22%.
Yeah. It suggests things are getting more nuanced. It's not just about basic rights anymore. When you get into specifics like trans inclusion or corporate allyship, public opinion seems, well, more fragile, even in generally progressive places.
That's a really key point. So, okay, if public opinion is getting more nuanced or fragile in some areas, how does that translate to how people feel day to day in their own towns or cities? The Gallup survey, covering over 120 countries, gives us a glimpse of that on-the-ground feeling, right?
It does, and frankly, the answer is pretty sobering. Gallup found only 39% of people globally think their local area is a good place for gay and lesbian individuals, and 45% believe it's not a good place. That's a significant number feeling unwelcome or unsafe. Now, it has risen gradually from 23% back in 2007, so there's some slow progress. But acceptance is massively correlated with laws. Countries with marriage equality, Iceland, 93%, Netherlands, Belgium, Sweden, all around 90% score highest. Compare that to places where same-sex relations are criminalized, Ghana, Lebanon, Armenia, Senegal, all under 6% acceptance. Gallup's conclusion nails it. Legal protections both shape and reflect broader societal acceptance. Laws matter deeply for lived experience.
Right. And speaking of safety and lived experience, let's talk about some specific incidents that really bring these concerns home. Our reporting included a really disturbing account from Berlin about a poisoning incident at the Berghain nightclub. What happened there?
Yeah, it's an alarming story. El Cavaliero man, who used to be the artistic director at Schwooze, shared his experience. Said he blacked out after leaving his drink unattended for just a few seconds. He was understandably angry the person wasn't caught, though he did say Berghain staff acted quickly with medical help. He reported it to the LGBTI police unit, which is a dedicated unit there. And worryingly, he said dozens of others reached out with similar stories. He called spiking a huge problem in Berlin clubs.
That's terrifying.
It is. And man's calling for venues to step up more staff training, warning signs, better support for victims. But here's the kicker. A reliable source we have inside the club mentioned Berghain is actually considering closing for good because of this issue.
Closing Berghain? Seriously?
Apparently. I mean, that shows how severe this is. It raises huge questions about the safety of even iconic queer spaces.
Wow, okay. And then shifting across the Atlantic, Washington, D.C. hosted World Pride. Hundreds of thousands attended. But our newsletter mentioned the celebrations were overshadowed by violence in DuPont Circle. 2 teens stabbed, a man shot in the foot.
That's right. Now, authorities were quick to state these specific attacks were not connected to Pride events.
Okay.
But still, the incidents led to a park evacuation and definitely heightened concerns about spectator safety. You can't separate it entirely, can you? Even so, the organizers really emphasized the resilient solidarity of the LGBTQ plus community. World Pride remained a symbol of unity. It shows that tension between being visible and being vulnerable.
A constant tension. And then, moving to something truly tragic, the murder of Francisco Albornoz in Chile. A 21-year-old gay pharmacist found in a ravine. Just awful.
It's horrific. 2 men, Christian Gonzalez and Jose Miguel Baeza, have been charged with premeditated murder. The reports say he died from multiple blows to the head. What's really crucial here, and what groups like Foundation Iguales are pushing for, is for this to be treated as a hate crime. They see it as a reflection of deep-rooted prejudice. And that forces us to ask how legal systems actually deal with violence motivated by hate against queer people. It's a stark reminder of ongoing dangers.
It really is. Okay, let's try and shift gears slightly, maybe to something a bit more positive. Looking at corporate support and cultural representation. One of our reports highlighted Deutsche Post launching a limited edition #DeliveredWithPride 2025 stamp series. How significant is a gesture like that?
Well, it's certainly a welcome gesture, especially given what that Ipsos survey showed about declining brand sponsorship, right? So yeah, 4 95-cent stamps, rainbow flags, slogans like love is love, love wins, limited run of 500,000, it's visible. And Nicola Hagleitner, a board member, explicitly said Deutsche Post sees diversity as a strength in business, but also in society. So they're framing it as a core value.
Yeah.
In this climate, an initiative like that feels more substantial than just, a rainbow logo for a month. It shows some companies are sticking with it.
It's good to see. But the picture isn't quite so rosy everywhere, especially online. We also covered that survey from tsdating.com in Germany and Australia. It pointed to some real, persistent challenges for trans users on mainstream dating apps.
Yeah, those numbers were pretty sobering, weren't they? Only 15% of the trans respondents felt safe on general dating apps, even during Pride Month. Over half reported regular harassment, like 61% got sexually objectifying messages, 48% couldn't even properly represent their gender identity on the apps, and a third, 33%, mentioned people fetishizing them.
That's all.
It is, and it raises the question, are these big platforms doing enough? tsdating.com basically called out the tech industry, saying they need to go beyond marketing and actually embed inclusion into the design, the policies, the whole culture. There's clearly a gap there.
A big gap. Okay, from dating apps to a cultural revival. This is exciting. The cult LGBTQ plus series, Noah's Ark, is coming back, returning to Paramount Plus, and there's a new film planned. Why is this revival such a big deal, especially for Black queer representation?
Oh, this is huge news for fans, definitely, and really important for representation. Patrick Ian Polk, the creator, announced it. It lines up with the 25th anniversary of his film Punks, and incredibly, 20 years since Noah's Ark first aired.
20 years.
I know. He said it's really cool to know that the work still resonates. The original cast, Daryl Stevens, Wilson Cruz, they're back, plus new faces. And the new film is set to explore things like parenthood, transgender teens, Noah and Wade preparing for twins. It's tackling contemporary issues. Its return is significant because it offered such nuanced, specific storytelling for Black queer men, something still relatively rare. It's building on its legacy.
Fantastic. Okay, speaking of culture intersecting with, well, controversy. The Paris Pride 2025 poster, our newsletter, covered the debate around that. What's the core issue there? It sounds complicated.
It is complicated, very much so. You've got Jewish associations and right-wing officials in France claiming the poster has pro-Palestinian imagery. The LGBT plus group Beit Havorim called it political instrumentalization. But Inter-LGBT, who actually organizes the march, strongly denies this. They say the visuals are meant to represent the flags of Hungary and Bulgaria, places where Pride faces real restrictions. It's caused quite a fallout. The regional council, Ile-de-France, pulled its funding. FLAG, the LGBT plus police group, distanced itself. Inter-LGBT is calling the whole thing gross misinterpretations and pointing to, quote, a reactionary international climate. It really shows how easily symbols can be politicized and co-opted, doesn't it? Even when the intent is about queer liberation struggles.
Absolutely, a real flashpoint. And just quickly, before we wrap up, the Gay 45s also had some other great cultural tips this week. Film of the week, Almodovar's La Mala Education, Bad Education, drawing on his own experiences, powerful stuff. Book of the week, The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong, described as brimming with feeling for overlooked characters. And Music of the week, Bad Bunny's album, Debbie Tiramas photos, bridging current and vintage sounds, apparently very passionate, danceable Latino music, lots to check out.
Definitely. And, tying this all together, it leaves you with a pretty big question, I think. We see these clear global calls for basic anti-discrimination protections. We see these amazing, visible pride celebrations happening across Europe, showing such resilience. But then the data, like that Ipsos survey, shows support for certain rights is actually slipping. And the violence, the safety concerns, they're still very real, as we saw in Berlin, D.C., Chile. So the question is, how does all this visibility, all this resilience from the queer community, which is so evident in the stories from the Gay 45s this week, how does that actually translate into greater security, into unwavering support across all parts of society, not just some? That feels like the challenge right now, something for all of us to think about.
Next week, more news, hopefully better news. You can also listen to any of our articles. Visit gay45.com to read more quality journalism.